Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar on DAAD opportunities for PhDs, postdocs, and faculty for the funding of the academic year 2019 and 20. My name is Hani Geist. I'm the DAAD representative here in the San Francisco office. I will be your host for today, mostly working in the background, also answering your questions if you have them. This is a joint effort today. We have with us John Paul Kleiner, who's the DAAD representative, the senior manager for university relations in the DAAD Toronto office. And we also have with us Uschi Niedhammer, from the DAAD office, New York, who's been with DAAD for quite some time in various roles, and she'll be talking to us about some of the DAAD opportunities as well. And before we jump into the presentation, I just wanted to briefly talk about a few housekeeping items. So the presentation will be available later on our website. You will receive a link and you can download that so you don't have to take any notes. And I'm also recording this presentation so you can view it at a later point as well. You're currently all on mute. I hope you can hear us. You can see the presentation. If you do have any trouble, you can get in touch with me. You just pose the question in the question box. And I would also invite you to ask your questions as they come up about the scholarships or any other kind of information we provide throughout the webinar. Just feel free to pose the question as it comes up, and then at the very end we'll have a Q&A and we'll be able to answer all your questions. So today we're talking about opportunities for research and for funding in Germany. We will talk to you a little bit in general about the German research landscape first, then specifically about the DAAD funding that's available. And then we talk a little bit about other funding opportunities because there are other German funding organizations that have opportunities for funding for PhD postdocs and researchers at American and Canadian universities. And then we'll also provide you with a little bit more additional resources on research in Germany and the funding opportunities that are available. So let's jump right into the content. Go to the next slide. And this is something that actually my colleague John Paul will talk to you about, just a little overview about the German research landscape and some of the facts and figures. John Paul, you'd like to take over?
Certainly. Thank you, Hani, and welcome everyone. Yes, my name is John Paul Kleiner. I work with the DAAD in its Toronto office. So yeah, for my section of today's webinar, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview on the German research landscape, its major players, a little bit of information on its structures, and I'm going to wrap up with pointing you in the direction of some funding programs offered by some of these organizations that I'll be introducing to you. So there are a few key points that we would like to emphasize about the German research landscape. First of all, its size, very large as one might expect. There are almost 1,000 publicly funded research institutions in the country, and research enjoys a very high priority in terms of public expenditure. So in 2016, you had a total spend by both the federal and the state level governments in Germany of nearly 89 billion euros. That corresponds to just under 3% of GDP, so quite a significant figure there. As one might expect, with an investment of this volume, significant numbers of people are employed in the sector. Over 640,000 Germans have employment in the R&D sector. And one of the other main characteristics of the German research landscape that we would like to emphasize is its truly international character and flavor. Research in Germany is often an international, an interregional, multilateral endeavor. Germany has research and technology exchange agreements with more than 155 countries, including the United States and Canada. This facilitates this type of activity, and I can say that the trend is only in the direction of more and more cooperation beyond borders, beyond institutions. The Germans have certainly recognized the value of international, multinational collaboration. So, can move on to the next slide here. Now, there are a number of key policy initiatives that are helping to drive this activity in Germany, as is the case certainly here in Canada. There is a high-tech strategy, and in the German case, they have a program, High-Tech Strategy Fields of the Future. The key points here: healthy living, sustainable economy and energy, intelligent mobility, the innovative world of work, civil security, and the digital economy and society are areas of particular interest. It should be noted that while there are certainly funds earmarked for work being done in those areas, there are considerable funds available for work that's happening outside. So while there are priority areas, Germany tends to fund broadly across the disciplines. So it's not just the focus of looking for very much research that will lead to applied and immediate results. Basic research enjoys an important place in the German research landscape as well. Another key policy initiative that some of you may be familiar with is the excellence strategy. So this was brought to life in the mid-2000s as a partnership between the German federal government and the state governments to really support top-level world-class research that was taking place at Germany's universities. And basically, this is a program that saw those institutions which had existing, very successful research clusters, that would be research collaboration between institutions in a specific region, with the private sector perhaps, or even internationally, sees those schools receiving funds to strengthen that sort of activity. The program has been renewed recently, and it's now open-ended, with the state and federal governments agreeing to investing over 500 million euros a year to foster the continued creation and strengthen world-class research clusters and networks. So for those of you who are interested in working with Germany, as I imagine you all are, it might be worth your while to do some digging online and find the schools associated with the excellence strategy. They frequently have resources dedicated to bringing their international partners into their research activities, so this may be of interest to you. Of course, other key aspects, policy aspects of the research and development landscape in Germany is an investment in academic mobility. So our organization, the DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service, is a key player in providing transmission for this academic mobility. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. When we get to the programs, you can see what forms that takes, but we have programs to foster the movement of German scholars out to the world and vice versa. And then last, but certainly not least, there's a marketing campaign to raise awareness around research possibilities in Germany that happens under the umbrella of Research in Germany. This presentation here today is one example of that type of work. Now, research happens in a number of different settings in Germany. First, we have universities, higher education institutions. We have non-university research institutions. So these are institutes, research institutes, the names of which you probably are familiar. Examples here would be Max Planck, Leibniz, etc. We'll go into a little bit more detail there. The project leaders or the research team leaders at those institutions are typically academics who have a teaching appointment at a local university, but who conduct their research in the setting of one of these non-university research institutes. And then the third key pillar of the research sector in Germany is industrial research, so in private settings. So to give you a sense of the relative importance of these in terms of their share of where the activity happens, universities and non-university research institutes make up 1/3, whereas 2/3 or just over 2/3 of R&D activity in Germany takes place in a private setting. So it really is a combination, a healthy combination of private and public locations. Go into a little bit of detail on the first two of these pillars, the universities and the non-university research institutes. So the universities, there are over 400 in Germany. of which about 148 are allowed to confer doctorate degrees. There are two main types of universities in Germany, and this might be of particular relevance to some of you. These traditional research university are those sites where you see a clear combination of both teaching and research all inside one institution. Universities of applied science, however, have traditionally had more of a, I would suggest, vocational orientation. So these are institutions where, generally speaking, vast majority of them do not confer doctorate degrees, but master's study is the highest level of study. And they are institutions that have always been and continue to be very well connected with employers and industries in their region, so that there is very much a sense of preparing students, graduates, for work in specific employment contexts. Internships are often very frequent at universities of applied science, and a lot of really good applied research takes place in those settings. German universities are highly international, so at current levels, between 12 and 14%, depending on how you count, of the German student body are now international students. Germany is now the fourth most popular destination for students coming from around the world, and that's of all the countries in the world. Over 25,000 students are in Germany from abroad conducting doctoral studies, and of course Germans also travel quite enthusiastically. So just under 40% of Germans graduate from their university studies having had an international experience. So that would be a significant stay abroad outside of the borders of Germany. So that's the information on the universities. Move on to the non-university research institutes. And these are the big four. So I mentioned earlier to use some of these names. So we'll just touch on them. It's important to note that all of these organizations have their own funding opportunities. We will not be presenting details on any of their programs in the context of this presentation, but if you go to the websites that you find on this slide, you will be directed very quickly and easily to the programs that they have. And so if you're in particular a doctoral student, a postdoc, faculty, they all have fellowships and grants to support, foster international collaboration. So just to give you a bit of a thumbnail sketch on who these big four are, the Max Planck Society is made up of 83 individual research institutes, and their focus runs the disciplinary gamut. There is a particular emphasis, however, on life science and natural science at Max Planck, and basic research is really the hallmark of this institution. So when one thinks of basic research in Germany, it's often the Max Planck Society and its institutes that come to mind. The second group listed here are the Helmholtz Association. So Helmholtz is made up of 18 institutes. It has the largest budget of any of these non-university research institutes, and that reflects the fact that Helmholtz is really charged with addressing and researching the big questions facing humanity. So we're talking about energy, sustainable energy, earth and the environment, health, along with key technologies. So they have very large scale infrastructure, and here too, one can safely say, characterize the work that goes on there as being highly international and collaborative in nature. The Leibniz Association is the third entry in this slide. They have 89 institutes, and while they too run the disciplinary gamut, there is more of an emphasis in the Leibniz Association on social science and humanities. In addition to these research centers that they run, Leibniz also oversees several key archives and libraries. And at Leibniz, they understand their work in a significant degree as involving knowledge mobilization. So to take the work that their member institutes generate, the research work, and communicating that to the general public, but also decision makers in society. And finally, last but certainly not least, the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft or Society. Fraunhofer has 67 institutes, and this is really the home of applied research in Germany. So over half of the Fraunhofer budget is generated by contract research from private industry. So Fraunhofer is very well known for that. possibly of interest to some of you. For those of you who are simply trying to orient yourself on the German research landscape, there are a couple of really key tools that we would like to introduce you to. If you're looking for ways to find out who does your work in Germany, we would suggest that you have a look at first the Research Explorer tool, which is an online database which has entries on over 22,000 German university and non-university research institutes. It's searchable by any number of criteria, including keyword, field, and it basically would allow you to fairly quickly find those scholars in Germany who are working in your specific area. The second tool that we'd like to introduce you to is the Higher Education Compass. Now, this is a database which has entries on the more than 27,000 existing international research partnerships involving German universities. This could be helpful for you to determine if a specific institute of interest
John Paul, I think you're muted. There you go. John Paul?
Pardon me, I am having a coughing attack.
Oh, no. Okay, I'm sorry. I actually thought that I muted you accidentally. Okay.
All right. So, excuse me, I will soldier on here. The Higher Education Compass could be useful for you to determine whether an institution of interest to you in Germany has an existing partnership or collaboration related to your research question. In other words, you can identify where there might be a niche or a need for your work. I would caution that the Higher Education Compass is not 100% reliable. As you can imagine, with a database of this size, keeping it up to date is quite a challenge, and because it seeks to capture information from many hundreds of institutions, oftentimes the information in there is not complete or not entirely up to date. So it is a point of orientation, but I would not use it as definitive information. That would be the only caveat there. We can move on. As I mentioned, there are multiple funding organizations as well, and 3 of the main research funding organizations are ourselves, the DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service, the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Now, both of our organizations are really dedicated to individual scholarly mobility. We don't fund research projects per se, but we fund the academics who carry them out and provide allowances, fellowships, grants, scholarships that permit them to move to do their work. The organization that does project funding in Germany is the German Research Foundation, or the DFG. So if that's your area of interest, if you're already at that advanced stage, the DFG is probably the organization of most relevance to you. Now I'm going to take just a brief moment to introduce 2 programs, one from the DFG and one from the Humboldt, since we're on that subject. One really fantastic program offered by the colleagues at the DFG is a grant to support the initiation of international collaboration. So, as the name would suggest, this is basically funding for exploratory work involving German scholars and international would-be collaborators. And it funds the mobility of the German team to come abroad, in this case to the US or to Canada, for trips to explore the possibility of generating a research project, an application, etc. Provides per diem payments. There's details at the URL found online. It's a rolling deadline, and my understanding is that the adjudication of these applications can happen fairly quickly, but up to 3 months of travel and stay within a 12-month period can be funded here for multiple participants. So it's quite generous, and it's really quite an amazing program, and there's no commitment at the end of this period that an application will be definitively produced. Obviously, that's the goal, but failure is an option. And as we know, in honest open research, it's always a possibility. So something to consider. We'll move on to the Humboldt. And just to give you an overview, a thumbnail sketch of what Humboldt does. Humboldt offers, as I mentioned, individual mobility. Their focus is very much on senior researchers. So those are faculty who have obviously have their PhD, but have received their doctoral degree no more than 12 years previous. And then postdocs, recent postdocs. So for senior researchers, Humboldt can fund stays of between 6 and 18 months, and for postdocs up to 24 months. And you can see the rates of monthly remuneration. They're quite generous. There's also additional allowances involved there. These funding periods can also be divided up, so I believe into 3 separate stays. So particularly for faculty with teaching responsibilities, you could break up your funding period to go back every summer, for instance, for several years. So very flexible, really quite exceptionally good programs, and you can find more details on their website. So at this point, I am going to pass the baton on, I believe, to my colleague, Ushi.
I'm gonna jump in first just to give an overview, and then Ushi will take over and talk a little bit about funding. But before we go into details about the funding that's available through the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAD, I just wanted to briefly give you an overview of our organization, and also just for you an overview of what we offer in terms of support, but then also in general, few more details about our grants that are really true for every funding opportunity. So DAAD represents German higher education and research abroad, and we really represent higher education and research facilities. What that means is that, as Jean-Paul said, there's this initiative, Research in Germany, and so through that initiative, we attend conferences, we provide general information on the research that's available. So in addition to the funding that DAAD offers, we do also support you in just providing additional information. So if you're interested in research in Germany and you just need a little bit extra information on the German research landscape or the opportunities that are available, you can also get in touch with us. So this doesn't necessarily have to be just about funding if you want to contact us. And we are represented in various countries in the world. As I said at the very beginning, I'm representing the Western United States, and we have Jean-Paul in Canada. So this is information specifically for Canadian and American researchers or international researchers that are at US or Canadian institutions. So one of the key distinction of maybe other funding, like in the US, if you want to apply for NSF or other federal funds available for researchers, oftentimes you need to have US citizenship. And for DAAD, citizenship is not as important as really the location of where you currently are a researcher or where you received your PhD. So really, the funding available through DAAD is available to anyone located in the US and Canada. And something that I also wanted to highlight again, Jean-Paul mentioned it earlier, DAAD really funds on all academic stages and all disciplines. And it is available also if you have students and you would like some information for your students. Funding is also available on the undergraduate and graduate level. And another important general fact about DAAD funding is that you don't necessarily need to know German. It's certainly an advantage in your everyday life. But as Jean-Paul mentioned earlier, research in Germany is very international, which means that a lot of the labs are very international. So the language of the lab is oftentimes English. And for research grants through DAAD and also for the other organization, DFG and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, you don't necessarily need to know German. So that's really not a requirement. Let's move on to the next slide with a little bit more additional information. You see here the blue dots represent our offices in New York, Toronto, and San Francisco. And the other dots, the blue and the green ones, are the locations of research ambassadors in the US and Canada, and also young ambassadors. And this is our extended network of experts in German research and studying. You can find the research ambassadors that are currently DAAD research ambassadors on the website. For those who are currently listening live, I just uploaded the presentation as a PDF under the handout section. If you just open that section, you can download it as a PDF. If you listen to this presentation later as a recording, you will find the presentation on our DAAD.org webinar page. So you can download that and click on the link directly. And so every DAAD research ambassador and young ambassador has a brief profile with their host institution in the US and Canada, and also with their research field and with the experience that they had in Germany. So this is really an additional resource for you to get in touch with researchers in your field who've maybe researched at one of the institutions that you're interested in, or if you would like some general information about someone who did some research or studied at a German university. So I'd really like to invite you to take advantage of our extended network. And if you are even at one of the locations where you have a research ambassador on your campus, really I'd like to invite you to reach out to the research ambassador and get more information on a personal level through the research ambassador. And that was all that I wanted to just briefly talk about in general, what DAAD offers and our extended network. You can find more on our respective websites. You'll have the link at the end of this presentation. And now we'll give you a brief overview of a few of our programs offered for PhD postdocs and faculty. Again, for more details and more funding, you can visit our websites. And I'd like to now hand over the microphone to my colleague Uschi in New York.
Thank you, Hani and Jean-Paul, and hello everyone from New York. You might hear some sirens in the background. This is because the General Assembly currently takes place in New York, and we are very close, so I apologize for any noises you might hear in the background. But let's get started. As Hani said, I'm going to talk about funding programs for doctoral candidates, for postdocs, and faculty members. And I'd like to that is one too far. The language course is the first, yeah. So I'd like to start with a program that is called Learn German in Germany. This is a language course for faculty members. It's open to all academic fields except for faculty members in the fields of German studies, German language and literature, or German translation. The funding is for an intensive language course at various Goethe Institute locations in Germany. These are 4-week courses, and they are offered year-round. It's important to know that these courses are not for complete beginners of German, but some basic knowledge of German is required to qualify, and the award provides tuition, room, and partial board. It also includes health insurance. Travel costs are, however, not included. The next program I'm talking about is one of our most favorite ones. It's a research grant for PhD students and for postdocs. For PhD students, this can be up to 1 year of research in Germany. For postdocs, it is only a short-term grant. They can apply for a maximum of 6 months for research in Germany. The award includes a monthly stipend as well as a travel stipend and insurance. You can see the next deadline that is coming up soon on November 5th. for both the 10-month and the short-term grant. And then in May, we have another application deadline. However, this is only for the short term. That means up to 6-month research grant. Another program that, now I skipped one slide, I'm sorry. Okay. Another funding program for postdocs is the PRIME program. This is for postdocs who see their future career in Germany, but wish to spend some time researching abroad. The funding is provided for a total of 18 months. 12 months can be spent outside Germany, and then there's a 6 months reintegration period at a German university. The grantees actually receive a salary from a German university. They have a work contract with the German university, and the salary is also administered by their host university in Germany. Then we move on to an internship program that DAAD offers for master's and PhD students. The internships can take place in the summer or in the fall, up to 3 months respectively, and they are at German companies and non-university research institutions. They are specifically targeted for master's and PhD students in the fields of biology, chemistry, engineering, geology, physics, and closely related fields. And the database with the job descriptions opens soon on November 1st. And the selection process is basically a web-based matching process. So in the application, applicants apply for their favorite job descriptions, and then the companies will receive the applications and can pick their favorite candidates. Moving on to the next program. This is also a research internship for science and engineering students, but this is the other way around. This is for German students to come to the US or Canada. So that means that you could host a German student in your lab. These are summer internships that should last from 2 to 3 months. And those German RISE interns would be matched with a doctoral student at a university in the US or Canada. The working language is, of course, English. And as a host, you would be responsible to help the intern find an apartment and also, help them integrate in the country to get settled in that short period of time that they spend here in North America. The award includes travel subsidy, insurance, also an invitation to an alumni meeting, and of course funding to cover living expenses. The application deadline is very soon, on October 15th. So if you're interested in hosting a student, please contact our headquarters in Bonn as soon as possible. I'm moving on to short-term lectureships. This is a program that provides funding for hosting German professors and lecturers at a North American university. This is for short-term teaching engagements in the US and Canada. And the host institution must commit to providing a honorarium as well as office space and equipment, and then that will also be matched by DAAD funding. So DAAD will supplement the living expenses of the selected candidates. You can see there are multiple application deadlines coming up during the week for this short-term program. And again, we have the almost equivalent, the other way around, the visiting professorship program. This is in the other direction, so professors from the US and Canada who'd like to teach at a German university. This program is again open for all academic fields, and courses can be taught in English, French, or German. The German host institution receives the funding, and then the visiting professor is paid by the host according to German salary scales, depending on the federal state where the university is located. This is a program from 3 months, so 1 semester for up to 2 years. And I just realized that I must have skipped one program, so I quickly move back and see if I can find it in the slides. Yeah, this one here. We also have a research stay program for faculty members, not only for PhDs and postdocs. This is a short-term research program. Again, it's only for up to 3 months. Open to all academic fields for research, as well as also for artists for working projects in Germany. The monthly stipend to cover living expenses in Germany is about 2,000 euros. Travel subsidies not included in this short-term program, and it can be used to do research at a German university, but also at libraries and archives, other institutes and laboratories in Germany. The deadline for this program is also coming up soon on October 15th, but there will be another application deadline in May next year. And now we quickly move over the slides that I've already introduced, and I hand over to Hani again, and she's going to talk about where you can find funding, like resources for finding funding online.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Uschi, and also John Paul for this great overview of the German research landscape. As I said earlier, the funding that Uschi just mentioned, you can find the details on our DAAD.org page. But those are specifically funding opportunities that are offered through our organization. You can find more funding that's available through also the other organizations that we mentioned earlier in the webinar, for example, through the German Research Foundation or the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and other German funding organizations on the researchingermany.org website. And also on the funding-guide.org page, and the funding-guide.org website is a database that's hosted on our DAAD page, but it does include various funding opportunities from other organizations. You can browse by your academic level and also by your field, and where you're coming from. That may be a little bit confusing when you look for that field, even if you may not be a US or Canadian citizen. Please check that field for where you're currently are located, because that's really the most relevant in determining whether or not you're eligible for the funding. And then finally, I just wanted to also mention the Euraccess website that does have under their jobs section also information on funding. But if you are interested in not just funding opportunities, but maybe also research positions and positions at German universities and research institutes, then the Euraccess websites is an additional resource. And that is also a great resource for information in general on, for example, if you have a family, if you want to relocate for a certain time, that website has additional information also on visa processes, on accommodation. And so that is really kind of a one-stop shop for research funding opportunities, job opportunities, but then also other information that's relevant for you if you wanted to move temporarily or even permanently. And let's move on to the next slide, and that only has our contact information. We do offer joint programs under DAAD North America, which is DAAD USA and Canada. So all of the programs that we talked about are going to be administered in the DAAD USA office or in our headquarters in Bonn. But we do now have two separate websites, DAAD.org for DAAD USA and then DAAD-Canada.ca for DAAD Canada. And you will see quite of information that's similar, but then you will also see information specifically for your country, and you will also find the contact information for our offices. And in addition to that, we are also active on social media channels. For Facebook and Twitter, we have separate accounts for DAAD, USA, and Canada. And I invite you to follow us to stay up to date on upcoming events, but then also on deadlines that are coming up. And for that, I would also encourage you to subscribe to our DAAD USA and the Canada newsletter that always includes upcoming deadlines, but then also events that are near your area or that are online events like this webinar. And so that was really the information that we wanted to provide you today. You'll see on this last slide our contact information. You'll find that also on our websites, as I just mentioned. I'd really invite you to visit the websites. There are FAQ pages as well for recently asked questions. But then if you do have questions, we are there for you to answer them either via phone or email. And now we do have some time to answer questions from the audience. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the question box in your GoToWebinar panel. We do have some time for that, so I'll just give you a little bit of time to actually write down your question. Overall, just as a summary, I would really just wanted to stress again what John Paul and Oshie said earlier about the German research landscape and funding opportunities. So there's really a wide range of opportunities that are available in the various fields, various labs and funding organizations and research institutions that are available for German research and collaboration. So the DAAD funding really is more for short-term research for individuals. But if you have other projects, if you want to really have established an international research collaboration, the other funding organizations do also have funding. So really, no matter what kind of research project you have or what kind of goal you have in the time you want to do research in Germany, there is funding available either through us or the other organizations. I do have one question asking whether there's any opportunity for research international program staff. Jill, if you would specify that question a little bit more. Do you mean opportunities? Yeah, I think I need a little bit more context for that. The question is if there are any opportunities for research international program staff. In general, there is funding available for research, and that's available for researchers and oh, okay. So if there is exchange, if there are exchange opportunities for staff from the US or Canada to come to Germany, so there are, we do have two tours that we offer. One is the Germany Today tour. That is more for administrators to learn about the German system. We do have a science tour. You can find the details on our DAAD.org page under the faculty section. So there is one opportunity for that may or may not work for you, but in general, the research grants and also the teaching opportunities to Germany, that's of course on the individual level, but that is also something that could be used to better understand the German university system and also the German research landscape. So the intended goal is for both. Of course, for the research grant to do research, the main focus on that, and for the teaching position to really teach. But of course, we do understand that if you have other goals and maybe forming new connections and collaborate or learning more about the German system, that's also an opportunity for you to use those grants. We have another question. For hosting a German student in the USAB, we did say visiting students would work with PhD students. So the question is, can it be a postdoc or a faculty as well, or does it have to be a PhD student? Uschi or Jean-Paul, would you like to take over that question?
Sure. In a PhD, postdoc, or faculty, any of them are eligible to submit a program description and host a German research intern through the RISE program.
Mm-hmm. So maybe also something to consider is it doesn't necessarily have to be just one person. So if it's, for example, a professor who jointly with a PhD student or a postdoc would like to be the host for a German student, that works as well. So you don't just have to be entirely responsible for everything if you want to share this responsibility with someone else in the lab. So that's certainly possible. And that would, of course, also be really interesting for the German student to not only work with one professor or with one student, but really collaborate and work with many colleagues in either the US or Canada.
If I can jump in here, another point to make about this specific program, RISE Worldwide, in Canada, it's offered in partnership with MyTax, and the deadline for submissions is considerably earlier than it is in the United States. So the deadline for this coming summer semester, so 2019, has already passed this year. But if there's anyone online now interested in that, if you go to MyTax to their global link page, you can find information there. They administer the program here on the Canadian side for us. So you can orient yourself to that, or simply contact me and I'd be happy to put you in touch with the relevant people there.
Mm-hmm. I have an additional question that maybe be good for you to answer, Jean-Paul. And this is from someone who says he or she is from India, working in the field of geoscience, and finding it difficult to get a collaborator. And I think that's something that maybe a few researchers struggle with, to really approach professors and researchers in Germany. This is specifically for a postdoc, but I think we can answer this question more generally. Just additional resources for someone who is very interested in collaborating with German researchers, but maybe finding it a little bit difficult to start the process. Jean-Paul, what would you say to those researchers? Specifically, this is for postdoc, but also in general.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it will vary by individual. It's not matchmaking. We can't facilitate specific matchmaking, but we can certainly point you in the direction of the resources. The Research Explorer tool, which I introduced near the beginning of this presentation, is the best place to identify specific scholars of interest. If someone's at the postdoc level, it might be worth identifying the PI in those research programs that's of most interest to you, but then going online and trying to find out who is in their team. It wouldn't be unusual, certainly in Germany or here in North America, for more senior scholars not to engage with unsolicited approaches from students, postdocs even. They clearly have busy schedules, a team already in place. It would have to take particularly exceptional circumstances for them to take the time out of their schedule to look into that sort of thing. However, they will, of course, have more junior members on their team. And so it might be worth your while to identify those scholars working on your area and then see who works with them and approach those people with an expression of interest, perhaps a paper, link, what have you. Introduce yourself that way. That might be a potentially more fruitful way to establish connections. Starting at the top may not always work well for you. Obviously, if opportunities present themselves for you to interact with these people one-on-one, face-to-face, I would suggest that has greater chance of success. But that would be my suggestion off the top of my head, is to indeed use the Research Explorer tool, but then cast your net a little wider.
And also, I mentioned as an additional resource, the Research in Germany website. And that website specifically also has one subpage for postdocs, and there are individual pages that help you, and if you wanted to find a postdoc position, or if you have your own research project and you're looking for funding, that is a really good resource for you to visit. And then also on the Research in Germany website, under the info service section, there are individual brochures with general information on the German research landscape. But more specifically, there are brochures uploaded as PDFs, and those are field-specific brochures. And one of them is in the field of geosciences, where you can just download the brochure. And that has a great overview of the research centers that work in that field, the centers of excellence. And within that brochure, you also find more on the currently funded projects by the German Research Foundation. And so that is a great tool, in addition to what Jean-Paul mentioned, the Research Explorer, to identify the labs that work on a research project that interests you. And then, of course, you can go on their respective websites and get in touch with them. And, of course, keep in mind that there are certain postdoc positions that are just posted online, just like other job positions. And so the Research in Germany website has a great overview for that. All right, we have a little bit more time if you do have questions. Otherwise, as I said, I'm recording this presentation so you can view it later again. For those who came in a little later, under the handout section, you're able to download the presentation that you just saw. And then I would really encourage you, for more information, to go to the Research in Germany website, to the Research Explorer. There's a lot of information that's there. I know it can be sometimes a little bit overwhelming, but really, if you're looking for collaborators, if you're looking for someone specific in your field to work with, those resources are really helpful. And those are the tools you can use to kind of identify hosts in Germany and collaborators. I don't see any more questions now. So we're just have a few minutes left, and I would say if there are no additional questions, I'd like to thank both Jean-Paul in Canada and Ushi in the New York office for joining us today, talking a little bit more about the German research landscape and the opportunities that are available. Again, we only talked about a few of them. You will find the full catalog under the funding guide database and also on our respective websites and the Research in Germany page. And if there are no other questions, I don't see any question coming in. I'd like to thank you for participating today. You can join our newsletter to stay up to date to any upcoming events. And that's all I have to say. Jean-Paul, Uschi, anything you would like to add before we close this webinar? Are you good?
I think I'm good.
Perfect. Then
Here.
all right. Well, again, thank you very much, Jean-Paul and Uschi, for joining us today. Thank you for all attendees for joining us today. And I hope I see you again virtually sometime in the near future. Keep an eye out for more events on our social media sites and our newsletter. And that's all we have to say for today. Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye.